Welcome to part 2 of the QR code adventure. In this video I'm going to walk you through how I personally created a QR code adventure project for some language arts and social studies students in a high school setting in Kentucky. So to begin with, this is the driving question that I dropped on the students. I just showed up one day and I was like, hey guys, check this out. And it said, how can we create a QR code adventure game to help the other students at our school and ourselves learn about the knowledge required to pass the U.S. citizenship test? So I was teaching in Kentucky, and I don't know if things have changed, but at the time it was a state required mandate for students to pass a U.S. citizenship test to graduate. And so this was kind of a big concern. And I thought this will be a fun way to tackle that challenge. So I asked my students, what do you need to know to answer this driving question? And they started asking questions, in which case I started recording them on the slide that you see here. And so they asked questions mostly about the process and about the content that they were going to be covering. But these kinds of questions are great for sustaining the inquiry if you're doing project-based learning. So record your need-to-know questions somewhere. If you write them on a whiteboard, take pictures of them or something so you can revisit them with your students throughout the project to update the questions, to answer the questions, to add those kinds of things. So I also, after we did our need to know questions, I explained the standards that we were going to be covering, which you see here. And then I had my students break those standards down. And to do that, I just have them rewrite the standard in their own language. So sometimes that means they have to redefine words and look things up. And then we talk about it as a group and we share out the way that the students revise those standards into their own words, so that way I can be sure that all of my students understand what they're going to be assessed on. So then I explain the project's parts to the students after we cover the standards. The students will each create 3 videos because I had a small class of alternative students, so I needed them to create more content by themselves. You may want to adjust that if you have a larger class. And to meet the needs of the material, I asked that each video contain the content for 3 pieces of info needed to pass the U.S. citizenship test. So that each student was responsible for learning and then teaching 9 different pieces of the knowledge required to pass that test. Each video, they would make videos, and each one would be accompanied by a quiz created by the student to let their viewer practice the content they learned from that video. And then QR codes were created for each video and placed in agreed upon places around the school. To get my students to do all this, I created a task list, which I'm going to give to you. It's linked below. You have all of the resources that I'm mentioning here. So with this task list, I basically walk students through each part of this project to guide them through the learning process. So we started with the end in mind. They know that they're going to create this QR code adventure game, and now it's time to do all of the learning to create this culminating product. So I started with an introduction to the content for this unit. I asked students to learn the citizenship requirements by looking over and practicing the U.S. citizenship test. And then I also gave them a link to learn about the 3 branches of the government. So as much as I can, I try to let students learn things on their own as opposed to me just telling them and hoping that they remember it. So this is a way for them to engage in that kind of process of learning on their own. And then I provide them with a focus question for their learning by asking them, what is the role of each branch when it comes to the lawmaking process? So that way they kind of have something to be thinking about when they're visiting that website to learn about those 3 branches of government. Then I provide them a link to an assessment that they can take about the 3 branches of government. And I give them the option. You can take it now, you can take it at the end of the unit, whenever you're feeling the most comfortable taking this. And then I would let my students take it multiple times if they needed to. And I might just change the format up a little bit for them. In any case, all of that is there and you have access to all of this. So to organize this chaos, I created this project organizer. That's a different file. Again, you have access to all of that. And the project organizer is kind of a graphic organizer that guides students through the content creation phase of the project. It has a color-coded graphic organizer space for the student citizenship questions, a color-coded section for their video scripts, and a color-coded section for QR codes and links to their videos. So they choose 9 appropriate questions to use based on the civics prep test. So they all practiced the test as many times as they wanted to. They each pulled out 9 questions that they wanted to cover and focus on in their videos. They collaborated with their classmates to make sure that they weren't double covering some of these same questions. And then I also had my students translate their questions into Spanish, because we had students in the building who really only spoke Spanish, but also were going to be required to pass the test. And so I wanted it to be fair for everybody, or equitable anyway. So I asked students to script their videos in English and in Spanish, or to design the text for a screencast in a way that showed both languages. And all of that is on the guides that you have access to. So students then created quizzes on Google Forms. I made a video tutorial for my students showing them how to make the quizzes for this project, and you're welcome to share that video with your students and use it yourself. It's kind of specific a little bit in a couple places to the project that I did, but you can certainly, have your students watch that and say, hey, where Mr. Ramsey says this, I actually want you to do this instead. And all of this is linked on the task list. It's there for you. The videos are not public, so you have to use that particular link to find them. You won't just find them searching YouTube. And then I asked students to paste a link to each of their quizzes on their graphic organizer, just to keep everything in one place so that they didn't have to hunt for these materials later on. Next, students had to figure out where to place their QR codes. So we used a map of the school, kind of like what you see near the door in most schools, near the classroom door, that has the fire escape kind of map. The one that says, hey, if there's a fire, run in this direction. We used one of those, and I kind of printed one and just made a copy of it, and we put little X's where we wanted the QR codes to go, and in that way we didn't have overlap, and so the students could kind of communicate that way. And we did have small groups, and so if you have a larger class, you might just maybe make the campus into sections. Say, okay, you guys take the northeast section of campus, with this group of students. Something like that might work for you. So in this step could be rearranged to come after the students have made their videos, but this is how I did it, and you can certainly rearrange the stages and the steps however it fits best for your class. So then it was time for students to make their videos, and I asked them to record a video in which they presented the content for each of their quizzes in English and in Spanish. So my students collaborated with a class of students who recently immigrated to America, and they spoke Spanish fluently. Most of these students were from Guatemala, and so I had them team up with my students. So my student would sit there and present the English, and then we have the Guatemalan student would present in Spanish, and in that way both students are able to learn this content and understand the content when they go to play the game. And I had them use their phones, laptops, iPads. I had a little flip camera that some of them used to record the videos. I encouraged them to work with others so that they would have help filming. They didn't even have to work with their classmates. They could have found somebody that was just sitting in the lobby that was doing nothing, I guess, if they, if they wanted to. In any case, the idea was that they collaborate with others. And I told them they could turn their content into a slideshow or make a screen recording to teach the content if they wanted to do that as well. Some students are shy about putting their face on camera, even though they take a million selfies all day long. The next stage was for students to upload their videos to YouTube. So I made a video to guide you and my students through that process that you can use with your students. It's linked on the task list. I also, in that video, explain how to make QR codes for the students. So once the video is uploaded to YouTube, they need to make their quiz or have already made their quiz so they can put the link to their quiz underneath that video as well. All right. If they don't have a YouTube account, then you can upload them yourself as the teacher. They can create a YouTube account. If your school has Google Apps for Education, you already have a YouTube account, and the students do as well because Google owns YouTube. So just remind students to put a link to their corresponding quiz in the description box on YouTube, and then they can mark those videos as unlisted if they don't want them to be public. If videos are unlisted, then the QR code can take you to that video, or a link can take you there, and you don't really get to the video any other way. Once the videos and those links to the quizzes are on YouTube, students create QR codes for the links to the video, and then they print out, label, and laminate those QR codes. Well, the lamination thing was really a step that I wanted to do, so that way I could kind of keep them safe or safer, but that's totally up to you. And then the students place their QR codes in the correct places in or around the building. And that was it. So I hope that you can use this project. I hope that it fits your needs, or that you can adapt it to do so. Feel free to leave feedback in the comments section. Send me an email. I'm ramseyzr@gmail.com if you want. Thanks for watching, and happy teaching. Also, one last shout out to NCTE for hosting an amazing conference. Thanks a lot. See ya.